in public international law. After university, Dr. Byron Cox worked with the Ministry of Legal Affairs of St. Vincent and Grenadines as Chief Advisor on International Law. Sometime later in 1998, Dr. Byron Cox was invited to join the United Nations organization, where he's worked for several decades. At the UNO, he's worked on legal matters and later on issues pertaining to sustainable development and the environment. Dr. Byron Cox has also been a special guest and/or distinguished lecturer and visiting professor at many universities, including but not limited to the Namibia State University, the University of Bonn, Oxford University, the University of Lesotho, the Addis Ababa University, and the University of Cologne. But that's Byron Cox, the professional. What of Byron Cox, the writer? Byron Cox began his literary writing at a very early age. He started with poetry, composing his first poems, I beg your pardon, at the tender age of 8. Darkness, written at that time, was a reflection of his fear of that phenomenon, instilled in him by the many jumpy stories he heard. His poetry at this time could only reflect his youthfulness, but at the same time very limited knowledge of poetic English and poetic style. Indeed, quite a few of these verses were written using a mix of standard English and the Vincentian vernacular. However, all of his verses of that time remain hidden from the public eye. For Richard, Byron Cox is a boy of a very peculiar childhood. Further, except for a few pieces such as Darkness and The Girls, most of the writings of Byron Cox's preteen years are forever lost to posterity. Upon entering his teens, Byron began doing rhythm poetry, which was the composing and reciting of his poems to particular drum beats and rhythms. This was a period of prolific poetry writing for him, but again, virtually all of this work has been lost to time. Most of these poems were written in the Vincentian lingo and included pieces such as That Go Down in South Africa, The People Get Freedom, and Lay Not Positive. This was a period of awakened social and political consciousness among the youth of the Caribbean, and thanks in part to the Black Power movement, the socialist and anti-colonial and anti-imperial struggles which were taking place at the time across most of Latin America and the Caribbean. And of course, the fight to end apartheid in South Africa was going on at that time as well. Among these were the revolutionary moments taking place at this time, affecting the consciousness of a young Byron Cox. These moments and processes had a great influence on the lives and writings of many in the Caribbean, including young Byron. By his mid-teens, at the age of 15, Byron Cox had naturally progressed to writing short stories, the first of which was called This Christmas Recitation. 2 years later, he was invited to relate this story on the national radio station as a part of that radio's Christmas holiday programming. This story was an instant hit and convinced Byron Cox that he had something to say and that he needed to say it. But while he continued to write poetry, it would be many, many years before he took story writing seriously. Entering his 20s, Byron also entered university, where he remained for the next 9 years, where he completed his tertiary education right up to the level of PhD as previously mentioned. During this time, he also wrote poetry on and off, some of which were able to survive. He then began to broaden his scope, tackling subjects ranging from the romantic to the philosophical. This resulted in verses such as Yet Love, The Gift, The Meaning of Christmas, and simple yet powerful May. This period testifies to the beginning of a very slowly maturing writer. But more significantly, however, this was the time when the idea of sharing his writing with the public on a consistent basis was born. And so it was that Byron Cox first began to write for the newspapers and later journals, something he continues to this day. As recalled above, upon completion of his university training, Byron Cox embarked upon a professional career, working first with the SPG government and then the United Nations. During this time, he continued to write newspaper and journals and began writing chapters